may be too big and of a scope that overshadows the quality of our Half Moon Bay. And those are the objections that I have too. I still wonder about how the financing goes. When community members were asked what they'd like in a new library, there was a very enthusiastic and comprehensive wish list that was generated. That should not be confused with the need to determine what we can afford and how big shall the facility be. Those are important and separate issues. 25,000 square foot facility, 2-story, that's as big as a quarter of a football field, I think. It's hard to see how that would fit on the existing footprint. That's what the report promises. So I think that needs to be looked at. When the community failed to pass the extension of the sales tax by a simple majority, which was said to include funds for the library, the council reworked the idea of a 10-year lease revenue bond to a 30-year lease revenue bond. A lease revenue bond is typically attached to an income-generating project, which a library is not. Plus, I don't see in the report any reference to how maintenance of this facility is going to be paid for. The failure to pass the sales tax extension was an expression of dissatisfaction from people who have not felt represented. We should all be aware of that now. Just as the election of Debbie Ruddock and Debbie Penrose represents a community need to have broader views represented. It looks like the Library Working Committee has been taken care of. Sounds like Debbie Penrose and Rick Kowalczyk are part of that. I'm assuming that everybody is going to be involved there. And by the way, one last point, what does stakeholder mean? I'd like to know. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Jerry Steinberg, followed by Paulette Eisen.
Good evening, Council. Jerry Steinberg, 591 Terrace Avenue in Half Moon Bay. This is a request that the City of Half Moon Bay consider supplementing their building permit for the Alianto Pacific Ridge Phase 1, which includes streets, sidewalks, gutters, and retaining walls only, with reference to realistic information on the route, the specific hours of day, and the number of 35-ton loaded material trucks per workday. It's in response to Pacific Ridge emails to neighbors within the 300 feet of the project describing the planned number of large loaded construction material trucks per day. First, the route to the site. I've met with Melvin Dixon, the site superintendent, and John Ward, the owner's rep, and they indicated they were working with their consultants, civil engineer and the soils engineer, to prepare a submittal to approval agencies, including the city and the Coastal Commission, for temporary bridging of a drainage channel on their property, and this would allow heavy loaded trucks to use the road behind the high school versus Terrace Avenue. Specific hours of the day. The Coastal Commission approval, paragraph 17D, construction responsibilities, indicates, except in case of emergency, heavy construction vehicles shall only cross the site, access the site between 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. Considering the high school will be in session, this may be reduced to less than 4 hours per day. Mr. Dixon's email indicating that 180 heavily loaded sand and aggregate trucks over a 3-day period, that'd be 60 trucks per day, just doesn't appear feasible. The number of material trucks per workday. Since it appears the material trucks are not from the local area, and I've talked with John Doherty about this, it appears that fewer trucks per day could be obtained, and also with stockpiling of the material on the site would be logistical and safer option. Finally, the city should plan safety, signage, and flagmen to alert all the coastsiders, not just the people within 300 feet of the site, to the timing of the movement of these large, heavily loaded trucks. Thank you.
Thank you. Paulette Eisen, followed by Walter Sensing.
Okay. I just want to make sure, as a point of reference on the card, that there's going to be an opportunity to talk about the library separately. This is because I have a library and I have something else for general comment. So I just want to make sure that I'm going to be able to address both those issues. Will that be a separate, can I get an answer? Will that be a separate, the library, when you get to the...
I'm writing a little note, instead of going through it, I'm just writing a little note, so I gotcha.
Yeah, so I'm going to have an opportunity, that's all I'm asking?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, so the, what I just, this is going to be brief, but, you know, my notes here that I have wrote down is I honestly cannot think of any issue that's more important to all of the inhabitants of Half Moon Bay, and it's not the library, than what it is to prepare for what has been termed in the press as a monster El Nino. There is everything that I've been reading, it's just one article after another about what we are looking at as a serious, real possibility into the winter and as far as they're now saying into the spring of 2016. We have a real problem here in Half Moon Bay when it comes to all drainage issues. And that is going to be, of course, exacerbated by something like a monster El Nino. So, of course, we hope it doesn't happen, but I think that this city has to be prepared. I think that it comes to all drainage and well-being of the citizens, and that is going to be, of course, exacerbated by something urging the city to come up with an emergency plan. So, of course, we hope everybody is alert and knows what they need to do when this thing, hopefully doesn't, but if it does strike, that is going to be, of course, exactly.
Thank you. Walter, did you want to speak on this and number 18 as well? Or just on this one? Walter? Did you want to speak on this or number 18 as well? Okay.
Okay. My name is Walter Sensing. I'm a resident of Half Moon Bay. And the item I wanted to follow up on was one that Paulette just brought up, and that's an emergency plan. And I believe this was mentioned at the last city council meeting by one of the city council members, that we need to now start looking at what we need to do as a contingency should this superstorm or series of storms come up and impact us in a terrible way. And I think there are some things that if we haven't started that process that we can do proactively. And a couple of those things, just to mention a couple, are the sandbags could be prepped and on standby in the event of flooding, so we don't have to find ourselves bagging sandbags at the last minute. And just as importantly, I feel like we could collect the names and phone numbers of people who are willing to donate their time and effort to volunteer for emergency situations such as that, so that we don't find ourselves also scrambling to get people to help out when the time comes. And I feel like these are things that we can take as reasonable steps towards minimizing the possible negative effects that the storms could have on us. And I say that in respect to all of the drainages here in Half Moon Bay. There are several of them. Some are more problematic than others. Some are easier to deal with than others. But all of them need to have at least be addressed and look at the significant issues that could develop as a result of heavy rainfall. And then I would also like to just thank, I didn't catch your name. Shirley, wonderful presentation. You summarized my sentiments completely, and I want to thank you for making that statement. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Pam Fisher, followed by Alan Alfano.
Council members, Pam Fisher, 659 Highland Avenue in Half Moon Bay. I'm going to shift it back over to transparency and fiscal issues. I did hand out an article that was written by Heather Somerville discussing the new apps that we have available to us in terms of accountability in budgets. So I'm going to read little sections of this just for the public's interest. Cities from San Francisco to Palo Alto and Dublin, even down to the financially troubled city of Bell in Southern California, are using Silicon Valley startup technology to open a window into government spending at an unprecedented level of detail. This is something that people have wanted for a long time. The idea that we have a right to know how our government is spending our money, said Emily Shaw, Deputy Director at the Sunlight Foundation, a nonprofit that advocates for open government. The government is experts in a lot of things, but when it comes to technology, they're the ones playing catch up. This is a quote from a San Francisco open source and data sharing company that has partnered with the White House to support President Barack Obama's federal open data efforts. Notoriously outdated IT systems have kept what should be public information, like a city's budget, difficult to access for both interested citizens and inquiring journalists, if we happen to have any in our audience. Municipalities have traditionally posted a PDF on the city website with a sparse collection of budgetary information. That data, much of it incomprehensible to the average reader, can't be searched, can't be sorted, parsed, or analyzed. To respond to open records requests, city financial officers often have to dig into old software systems, leading to lengthy delay and a big price tag for that information. OpenGov is a web-based accounting tool that allows governments to track their financial data and put it online in visualizations people can easily understand. The software is used presently by 27 Bay Area cities, counties, and organizations that allow citizens to search expenditures or revenues and track year-over-year trends. According to a survey from the Pew Research Center and a recent Gallup poll, after the recession revealed how frivolously some municipalities were spending, citizens grew more vigilant about keeping tabs on their hard-earned tax dollars. Palo Alto was the first city to use the software. It made an initial investment of, wait, $15,000. That's it for OpenGov. And they pay about $4,000 a year to license the software. At some point, there becomes no excuse for not doing open data unless you have something to hide. The Technology and Innovation Foundation, a Washington, D.C. nonpartisan think tank, says it is good for transparency and it's good for government. Thank you.
Thank you. Alan Alfano, followed by John Ullum.
Good evening, City Council members, Madam Mayor, and City staff. I just want to take a second here because I know sometimes what the City Council tends to hear in public forum are a lot of negative things, a lot of problems, and I think sometimes we need to take a step back because as you track whether it's a baseball team or a football team, no matter what it is, professional, high school, grade school, nobody wins every game. It's really the results, the end of the game, the end of the season that you really judge yourself by. And I think that's really what I want to talk about tonight is the things that the city, the council, and the staff have accomplished in a positive vein. And you heard tonight the Pillar Cedars Creek Bridge. That's really a very impressive project that the city brought together so quickly. And I tell you right now, if I were a betting person, I would have bet it would have never happened this year. So that's very impressive. The new city newsletters, the communications we get, the emails, I think those are really helpful. getting the word out about the general plan and all the other things that are happening in the community. And I drive by MacDutra Park almost every day, and it's really nice to see it coming together. And I really, truly think that corner of the city, the heart of the city, is going to be a really beautiful addition. And I don't think we should forget that $100,000 of that came from the Pumpkin Festival proceeds, very nicely contributed by help me with that. Beautification Committee, slipped right there. It's very impressive that they're giving back to the community. The other thing is the excellent condition, fiscal condition the city's in right now. That's really helping us get a lot of things done. The city's getting done that couldn't get done before. And something I think we tend to forget about, and that's how well the San Mateo County Sheriff is doing a great job in our community. They've been here for a number of years now, and I hear nothing but really positive things about what the great job of policing they're doing. And again, I'll say it again, I think our staff and our community is really great. City council volunteers, they don't work in the city hall 8 hours a day. The staff does, and the things that are getting done are really, truly a lot to do with what a great staff you all have. So again, no matter what kind of unkind chatter we all hear, it's really important that our city keep going in a positive direction. Nothing is ever perfect, but it's the end goal, the end game of what you want to accomplish. And later we'll get to talk about what I think is going to be a great project, and that's our new library. Thank you.
Thank you. John Ullum, followed by Jim Henderson.
John, thanks for having me up here. I think that looked up a little bit about the choices you made on the library architect, and it looks like you've done a really good job. Looks like the person who they put a really good presentation together. They really outshone everybody else. What I'm disappointed is why would this meeting have been not public? There's three kinds of meetings, right? The ones that have to be public, the ones that have to be closed. But there's a third kind of meeting, and that's the meeting that should be open. If you have a choice, the meeting should be open. If you care about transparency, it's a pretty simple policy, and I don't see any reason why anybody would argue against it, especially when you're talking about a library. We're talking about a citadel of knowledge, of making it easy for people to find out information. We could have had video of the meeting that you guys put together. Anybody could have seen what a great job you did. And honestly, I don't think there was anything there. There was no smoking gun, there was no gotcha moment. You didn't do anything illegal, there was nothing wrong with what you did. So why would you choose not to make it easily accessible? I mean, I just don't get it. And the reason why this is important is you look at the faith that people have in government in our country. It really is an important thing. People have to believe that the government is working for them out in the open, that there aren't things going on in the background. And I know it's stupid, but the perception that you're hiding something is a disservice to all of us. And there's no reason for it in this case because you didn't do anything wrong. You went through a pretty good process of how to pick an architect. Now, to MacDutra, actually, it is looking really good. I think it actually is going to be something that really was worth $400,000 when you're done with it. And I can't see that in plans, but I sure can see it now. But on July 10th, I asked for the contract and the timeline. That should have been right at the top of the stack. Just an easy thing for you to give to me. And I end up getting, after almost 30 days, 2 pages out of 151. And what's worse is, the next day I get an email from your city clerk asking me to sign off and agree that I've been provided with what I asked for, when you could clearly read in the 2 pages that I had not been provided what I asked for. It was insulting. And there's, again, no reason for it. There's nothing in that contract that really means anything. Thanks for listening to me.
Thank you. Jim Henderson.
Madam Mayor, and members of the City Council. A heartfelt thank you on behalf of all of those who keep community radio going in this community. Thank you for including in your recent budget the allocation of money for the purchase of 2 generators to keep KHMB AM 1710 and KHMV 100.9 on the air in case of an emergency. I thank you. We thank you. Brad is our operations manager. Say hello, Brad. Wave for the crowd. Thank you. Okay. He and I fired up the generators today. They are working. I wanted to make sure before I came before you. And tomorrow, we're going to actually put them in the sequence of all of our transmitting equipment to make sure that they're working properly, so that if in the case of an emergency, we will be able to activate them and, stay on the air. And of course, with everything that's been said tonight, I have to admit that maybe I should also be requesting a rowboat for the future. I'm not sure of that, maybe, And I would be remiss if I didn't direct your attention at this time to a person that has become a friend in a short period of time, Russell, who actually was your point person to get the generators and bring them to us. So thank you, sir. And again, thank you, council.
All right, that concludes public comment. And we go now to the consent calendar. Council, we have item number 14 and number 17 have requested to be pulled by the public. And we will hear 14 and 17 at the end of our agenda.
17 is not consent. Just 14.
Just 14. Thank you. All right. So 14 and 15 are pulled.
I move to approve consent agenda items 1 through 13.
Second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Roll call, please.
Aye.
Aye. Yes.
Aye.
Yes. Thank you. And we'll hear 14 and 15 at the end of the meeting. So let's go now to ordinance and public hearings. This is to introduce an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Half Moon Bay, amending the Half Moon Bay Municipal Code relating to references to councilmen. We will no longer be called councilmen, since there's 3 women here. It's the small things. Who's going to give a brief staff report on this? I don't think it should be a real controversial subject.
Can we just make a motion?
Can we just make a motion? Okay.
I move to
Let's do
introduce the
that.
ordinance amending the Half Moon Bay Municipal Code relating to references to councilmen.
I second it.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Noes?
By the way.
Passes? Passes completely 5-0. We are now referred to as anything other than councilmen. Item number 17, ordinance and public hearing to introduce an amending chapter 18.03, 18.06, and 18.09, implementing the 2015 to 2023 General Plan Housing Element Program 3-6, and in compliance with the statutory requirements of the California Housing Accountability Act, Senate Bill number 2, requiring that supportive housing, transitional housing, and emergency shelters be principally permitted uses within the community.
Thank
We
you.
have John. Thank you.
Mayor, council members. I'm going to hand this off to Bruce Ambo, the city's planning manager. Just to recall, the city council adopted housing element, and as part of that housing element, which was ultimately certified by the Housing Community Development Department for the state, there were multiple mitigation and implementation measures that had to be implemented. This is a statutory requirement as indicated in your staff report, but this is also based on our adoption and approval has to be done by no later than March of 2016. So there is some time criticalness to this issue. So I will turn this on to and over to Bruce. Thanks.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. I'll just begin with the presentation here. Siobhan, let me see. Okay. Mayor and Council, we're asking that you introduce 4 key new definitions into the zoning ordinance. That would be the definition of target population, supportive housing, transitional housing, and emergency shelters. Second requested action associated with that is to amend the zoning ordinance and the coastal implementation program to provide for what's statutorily required in supportive and transitional housing and allow those as permitted uses in all residential zones. And then to amend the PS zone, which is a public and quasi-public land use zone, to allow for emergency shelters in the PS zone. And lastly, before that action is taken, to adopt the CEQA findings in finding of consistency with the initial study and negative declaration that was prepared for the housing element. As John indicated, this is a follow-up based on our ordinance, Senate Bill 2, what was adopted in 2008. It requires that at least one zone in every community be identified to accommodate emergency shelters as a permitted use. And in our case, we've identified the PS Public Service Zone. And then it also requires that supportive and transitional housing must be a permitted residential use in all the residential zones. And in our case, we've identified that as a permitted use in the land use matrix that I'll get into. As John indicated briefly, we've had this requirement, the last housing element, from 2007 to 14. We didn't perform on these amendments yet, so we still have that requirement, and that's why it's important for us to perform and complete those amendments this cycle before March of 2016, or else we risk decertification of the housing element that was recently adopted and approved by this council. The Planning Commission recommended approval of this back in June of 2015, and they also recommended adding an additional definition, which is included, which is the definition of target population. These are the definitions. I won't get into them, but there's a definition, and they're also in your staff report. This is a definition of target population. Here's a definition of supportive housing. Additional housing is defined, the new definition. And lastly, emergency shelters would be defined in these amendments. So to kind of summarize, these are statutorily required. Everybody in the state has to do them. We're one of the last communities that still hasn't done this. It requires that these transitional and supportive housing facilities be reviewed and approved in the same manner as all residential structures, and and the only difference we have is in the coastal zone it requires approval of a coastal development permit, but that's if new building is proposed. If no new building is proposed, then these facilities can go in any residential zone. The areas that we're amending are identified in red. So this is, it's kind of tough to show it on the slide, but this is the use matrix, and all we had to do was identify supportive and transitional housing as a permitted use in all residential zones. That's what this amendment does. Similarly, we had to identify in the public service zone the list of permitted uses. We're adding emergency shelter as a permitted use at the bottom, identified in red. And then just to give you some sense of where the public service zones are, they're pretty much in those blue areas located in the central portions of the city. Most of these properties, there's about 110 acres in the PS zone, are owned by governmental, school, religious organizations that commonly provide these same services and facilities. Here's a closer look in a little bit better detail. The blue areas are a better look at the PS-owned areas where the emergency shelters would be principally permitted. So, again, our recommendation is that you make a finding of consistency with the same environmental document that was approved recently when you adopted the housing element. These same provisions are identified in that housing element to be implemented, and this proposal does that. So, so we're recommending that you adopt these, and we're here if you have any questions.
Thank you. Council, do you have any questions right now? We do have one card. Wait, okay. We have a card from Eric DeBode.
Hit the green button. Do I have to hold it down? No. Thank you so much. I wanted to thank library friends here. It was a fantastic presentation at the beginning. Strange coincidence, I was at the Burlingame Library yesterday with my kids, the Pacifica Library today with my kids, online. It's a fantastic system, and we love our local Half Moon Bay Library. I work at the Catholic Worker, and housing is a big concern of mine, and I'm excited to see this being implemented and hopefully approved. I'd love to just throw out there that I think we should do some kind of study locally to look at housing, sales, rents, but also the quality of housing, particularly for low-income folks and people who are doing farm work in our wonderful agricultural fields here. I've been on some of the farms to see the living conditions firsthand. I've delivered beds and other furniture to rental units and homes, like apartments and homes, and I've seen families doubled and tripled up in those units, and I'm concerned about the effect that has on a lot of people in our community, particularly kids who go to Hatch and Cunha with my kids, and I want to see the ability of those kids to succeed and achieve their educational goals. And I want to see health in these family units supported and doing well, and I'm concerned that conditions can sometimes negatively impact that. So I think we need to look at shelter and low-income housing and those kinds of questions very seriously. We get requests constantly for housing, and our hospitality house is always full. My personal passion is to see us work together to develop a daytime hospitality space where we could kind of focus energies with the homeless population and day laborers in our community who need laundry, showers, breakfast and lunch, mail, minimum storage, and that sort of thing. So just wanted to come and congratulate you and encourage you to keep working on this, and I'm happy to work with you to try to develop more low-income housing and something for folks during the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeBode, and thank you for your service and compassion to members of our community. Bring it back to council. Any questions about this? Debbie?
A serious typo on page 141. It's the bottom, the last paragraph, second line from the bottom. I know I'm nitpicking. I'm not sure that's a good phrase for this typo. But.
And I was just going to excuse me for a minute. I'm going to officially open the public hearing, so consider.
With your.
Yeah, with my 3D gavel.
After the word semi, it should be public. Page 141, last paragraph, second line from down. See it?
Yeah, we're good. Okay.
That's critical. I think you have agreement on that. All right, any more questions or comments? Vice Mayor Kowalczyk?
So I just want to make a comment that I've related to this topic. So this introducing this ordinance will bring some parity for affordable and low-income housing and shelter issues in our community. But this is a good time for me to point out something I've become aware of in our community over more so in the last few weeks, very recently, is there are members of our community, and I've been told from local social services, numbers as high as 30 families in the last 3 to 4 months have been displaced because they can no longer afford their rental homes, their rental apartments, the rooms they rent for the evening, and they come in when the family is asleep and they share a sofa. And these people are being displaced. They are members of our community and they work within our community. And the tragedy of our prosperity is that not all incomes are rising at the same pace. And landlords have the opportunity to push out tenants who can no longer afford higher rents. And it's a serious matter. I want to escalate it to our friends at the county and address this. When a family comes to me and says, I need help, we have to leave. It becomes very personal. So I just wanted to share that because it's very relevant to this topic today in this item. And I think it's important that we're all aware of it. We have a broad spectrum of people who live in Half Moon Bay, and we all need to be represented. Thank you.
Thank you. Well said. Any other questions?
Oh, just comment. I've become aware of the displacement as well. It's basically landlords increasing the rents and evicting people who can't pay. And there's numerous families, low-income families. And I don't know what the city can do to rectify that problem, but we certainly should be collaborating with county partners and nonprofit partners to come up with localized solutions. And we do have a pot of money from development that either builds affordable housing or pays in lieu fees. So we have almost $2 million. That would have to leverage other funds. I don't know what we can do with that, but I think that would be a good discussion sometime in the future about how we might use those funds to provide assistance. It's a serious problem. If you don't have any shelter, everything else just falls apart. So I think certainly this ordinance is a good start, but I think it's going to require more of an effort on our part to address.
I agree, and I think we can partner with a lot of different people. Earlier this summer, I met with a couple of school board members who were concerned because even teachers can't afford to live here, and some of them were being released from their homes as well. And I know people are looking at co-sharing. I know Judy Macias's group is looking at housing sharing and different things. So I think it'll take a lot of partners, and maybe we can get something on the books to just start brainstorming, and for maybe some of these small infill lots in town, encourage people who own them to build, small housing for that. Who knows? There could be all kinds of things, but definitely it's a problem. As we know, we hear it all over the Bay Area that now we are the most expensive place to live in America, which is incredible. So, if there's no more comments, Council, I will close the public hearing and I can entertain a motion. Have at it.
I move that we approve an ordinance, PDP 039-15, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Half Moon Bay, amending Chapter 18.03, use classifications, modifying subsection 18.03.030, residential use classifications by adding new definitions in subsection 18.03.030H, target population, subsection 18.03.030, it's either I or, I think it's I. Supportive housing, subsection 18.03.030J, transitional housing, and amending and reordering subsection 18.03.040, public and semi-public use classifications, to add a new subsection 18.03.040F, emergency shelter. amending Chapter 18.06 to add supportive housing and transitional housing as a permitted use in all residential zones in Table A-1, Schedule of Residential Uses, and amending Chapter 18.09, public and quasi-public land use, P-S, to include emergency shelter to the list of permitted uses in Section 18.09.020.
Motion has been made. May I have a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstain? Motion passes completely. Thank you. Okay, a quick 5-minute break. We're on a 5-minute break. And it's a real 5-minute break, folks. Yes. Yes.
Give up? Come on, guys, like never give up. On the city, I know. And also, you know, they all express very concerned. No, right, that's right.
The item that we're discussing now is awarding of a contract for architectural and related design services for the Half Moon Bay Library project. And city staff?
Yes, I believe there he is. Our interim community development director will make the presentation.
Passes, even though they're there. Thank you, Mayor, council members. Tonight before you is a request to adopt a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a final agreement with Nolan Tam Architects and Planners for architectural and related design services for the Half Moon Bay or Coastside Library project. And we'll go, this is a slide you've seen before, but we've got a building that was built in 1971. It is city-owned, but the library is operated by the San Mateo County Library, JPA. So we have a partnership already in place, and this project involves 3 partners, which include the city, the county of San Mateo, and the San Mateo County Library Joint Powers Authority. As you will all recall, on May 5th of this year, the City Council entered into a project construction management contract with Griffin Structures, Inc. Griffin Structures had gone through an RFP process and had been selected in a manner fairly similar to what the architecture process went through. They have been involved in the process since the beginning when they were authorized and executed contract to proceed with helping with developing the RFP. And Mark Schatz in particular, who is here tonight, who is an architect by trade, has been extremely helpful in working through this process and helping us, I think, get to a great proposals and get to a great final listed architect for tonight's consideration. Basically, when we went to you and was authorized to proceed with the construction project management contract, we identified basically the critical next step following that was to hire an architectural firm to design the library and prepare construction drawings, and that is why we're here tonight. So, simple questions of why do we need an architect? Pretty much state law requires us to have one in part. But the real reason is that this is an extremely critical and difficult project, both exterior-wise to make sure that the project meets the expectations of the community, blends with the community, and also makes a statement, which I believe is something of concern and consideration, but also that the interior design is done properly and appropriately for long-term use and long-term maintenance, and all the things that go with that, including technology and looking at integration of sustainable development, both from an operational and construction perspective. We went through an extensive process. It was a pretty standard process, frankly, in terms of preparing a request for qualifications proposals, circulating that. We met with all of the potential proposers and made it a mandatory pre-construction, pre-PRID meeting, pre-proposal meeting. They don't like pre-bid in architects speak. We received ultimately 18 proposals. Staff of the city, the county, and the county library JPA went through all 18, met, and concurred finally on 5 of the shortlisted firms, and we went through a process in which you've heard a little bit about tonight in terms of involving both staff level and community and electeds in the process of helping vet those 5 individual firms to hear their presentations and to help and assist staff in identifying ultimately what was believed to be the best candidate firm for this project in this community. So Nolan Tam is who, Chris Knoll is here in the audience, as well as Abraham, the project manager. Ultimately, what we believe to staff and as a whole, including all the partners, as well as what we heard from the the community members and the electeds who were participating in assisting us, was that they had a proven track record. They'd shown that, they demonstrated that in all the materials, and ultimately when we did background and reference check work and everything with that, that's what we found. We also found, and one of the reasons they were included all along in the list and included out there, was their extensive experience with public libraries. There are a number of firms that are clearly out there that have done work, and they certainly have. Los Gatos Library in particular was one that the group visited, we looked at, and has been an award-winning project. Again, one of the critical issues we've heard over and over and over is the need to deliver this project under or on schedule and or on budget. So they have a proven track record of delivering projects on budget and within budget and dealing with those issues. And finally, I personally know that they were out here at least 4 times because they stopped by at least a couple of times, and I know they stopped by the library and were in this community. I believe that Nolan Tam truly demonstrated that they wanted this project, they understood the community, they wanted to be in this community, and that they had, as part of every process that we went through and every proposal, that they demonstrated a clear understanding of the project and of the community, and of the need and desire to see something special built. So next steps for the project, I know there's folks are questioning and it's in the scope of work out there, but generally speaking, we're looking at a community outreach process commencing as soon as a contract is executed. And then ultimately, as part of that process, there will be a conceptual and schematic design work that's done in conjunction with that. Again, tonight before you is a request to adopt resolution authorizing the city manager to execute the final contract with Nolan Tam for architectural and design related services. Thank you.
Thank you. We have several cards, but before that, if council has any questions right now, we will hear public comment. Again, please be respectful for everyone's comments. We do have about 15 or 16 here. You do get 3 minutes. But again, if you could be succinct in directing your comments, that's appreciated by everyone. I would like to recognize that we do have in the audience tonight County Supervisor Carol Groom. Thank you for coming here this evening. So we'll start off with Bill Kehoe, followed by Paulette Eisen.
Sorry, I have a piece of candy in my mouth. I thought you were going to go in the order that they were given. Oh, excuse me. Someone's glasses? Stop the clock. Anyway, excuse the candy rattling around in my mouth. Hi, I'm Bill Kehoe. I'm from Morris Beach. I am a member of AFOG, Advocates for Open and Government. And, you know, you've heard it before, but we're all about transparent and accountability in government. And one of the reasons I'm here tonight is because I want to talk about the process in selecting the architect. I've got nothing against the architect or the plan, but the process broke down. And there's a lot of things that happened there that, you know, just what we're trying to do is to make sure that everybody has fair and equal access to government processes and that everyone gets heard. And so when this meeting was taking place, you know, why was it enforced to city when it's a coastside library? I mean, there's just something that smells about that. I mean, I'm sorry, that's my perception, but, you know, it should have been held here. Why were some members of the public allowed in and other ones weren't until they raised a big ruckus? And then some of the elected officials there said, wait a second, they should be allowed because this is basically a public meeting. And likewise, it should have been allowed to be filmed so other people could see it because under the Brown Act, that's actually legal to do that. But I was told, well, you know, you had people there from the mid, oh, and I'm from the mid-coast, as you know, Morris Beach. And some of the things that upset me about this is that I don't think the mid-coast was fairly represented in any of the library process. I know you have a couple of people from Morris Beach, but the Morris Beach is in the unincorporated area of the Mid-Coast. We have a community council. And I'm not really speaking to you, I'm actually speaking to Carol Groom and also another chief of staff for Don Horsley, Supervisor Don Horsley, Chris Hunter, who's back there. You know, if they're going to pick people to represent the coast side, the least they should be doing is passing it by the Mid-Coast Community Council. You don't see me here often because, you know, I don't elect you, so you really don't even have to listen to me. But I get to elect, and they do have to listen to me, and I go to all of those meetings. And when I talk to people in the Mid-Coast, they're a little bit upset because we don't feel we have equal access to the City of Half Moon Bay Library. If you looked at Highway 1 this weekend, I couldn't get down here. You know, it was shut down. And that's most weekends, winter, summer, fall, spring. I'm going to run out of time, so I've got to be quick. I want to thank Shirley Holly, who actually expressed a lot of my comments exquisitely. The cost, the size, why you're using LRBs. You know, you just all talked about low-income housing. But here's the thought. If you didn't spend $25 million on the library, you only spent 15, you'd have $10 million to look at the problem that you're all concerned about with low-income housing. And this is the way government's got to work, just like my family. You know, I would have loved to buy a sports car when I had 2 kids, but my wife needed a station wagon, you know, so I kept an old car. You know, you got to make those choices if you want to take care of the people you should be taking care of. So what is your priority? I had more, but I ran out of time. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. Paulette Eisen, followed by Walter Sansing.
All right, I want to, there's not a lot of time, so I am going to just jump in. I want to address everyone here and ask those of you, and I'm glad that I'm getting to talk early in this session, because I want to ask all of you who are portraying any opposition to the existing library plan as villains or villainous to simply stop this propaganda. You are dividing the community, and that is not what you should be doing. The reason the Polarcitos Bridge came together, yes, thanks to the council, thanks to the staff, but thanks to all the people in Half Moon Bay who rallied around this, something more sensible, something more moderate, something that is not going to extend the finances of the people of Half Moon Bay. We are the ones on the hook. We are the ones on the hook for the maintenance of this thing. We are on the hook to make sure that the money goes through properly for this. If the revenues from the existing businesses don't come in as we'd like them to, we're going to be on the hook for this. So yes, Rick Kowalczyk, you may say that you're going to try everything to make sure that taxes aren't raised, but you cannot guarantee it. Because this is a major, major expenditure. And I'm asking everybody, and I am a friend of the library, I'm asking everybody who's going to come up here and do this thing of how important a library is. None of us, that all these hundreds of people I have now spoken to, nobody objects at all to a library. Everybody supports it. Everybody, just like Shirley expressed it. Everybody wants a great library for Half Moon Bay, but it's the scale, it's the scope, it is what is appropriate for Half Moon Bay, and I don't think we should be shutting out so many people, probably the majority of people in Half Moon Bay, from having a voice in this situation. So I beseech everybody involved in this project to come together as a community and compromise to what it is that we're going to end up with. Thank you.
Thank you. I will ask the public again, please be respectful of every speaker.
Does that
Walter
include
Saint-Saint,
me?
followed by Pam Fisher.
I am going to be very brief because essentially people have already said what I'd like to say, but I would like to follow up on what Paulette said about bringing the community together. And I don't think that the process that I've seen so far is one of inclusion and one of bringing the community together. In fact, I talked to somebody I didn't even know today who said, that's just the way it is in Half Moon Bay. And I go, gosh, you know, why does it have to be? What's going on that we can't have an open and honest discussion about things that are important to all of us? And the library is one of those. No one that I have talked to, except for one person who doesn't want a library, doesn't care about the library at all. Everyone else wants the library, wants a good library in town, but it all boils down to the process, and I think it boils down to the requirements analysis, and that's the part we're getting ready to engage ourselves in with these contractors. And I call upon them to do a thorough job of honing down the requirements and getting it down to what the people of Half Moon Bay and this community as a whole need, not what a few people want and what a bunch of people have put down as a wish list. That's no way to go about planning something as important as a library. It's a good starting point, but it's not the way you develop the plan, is by putting all the stuff into all the wish list into a box and say, here we go, we're going to make everybody happy. What we need to do here, I think, is step back and try to work together to come up with something that's going to work for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Pam Fisher, followed by David Oblovi.
Thank you. What can I say? I'm going to agree with what Shirley said, with what Paulette said, with what said. And the only true objection I have had is in the transparency of this issue. And again, there has been, as an educator, I am certainly a proponent of generating human capital. I'm also a proponent of fiscal accountability, and I'm also a proponent, as a member of Advocates for Open Government. And the most disturbing issue occurred when the interviewing process for the architects was held in Foster City and was designated as a closed private meeting. When you gather 2 council members from this organization, 2 people from other organizations, you're creating a board that can exchange information freely, but once you ask them to render an opinion or make a recommendation, that body then becomes subject to the Brown Act. And there is just no question that this was a faulty assessment by staff. The other issue is when you have to subvert and bend and twist to try to come up with rationale for this having been a legitimate private closed meeting, there's a problem. And I would agree with John Ullum. If there is a question, error on the side of transparency. I sat as a citizen in the community I came from before I was elected to their school board, where they interviewed multiple candidates for a retrofit and addition, multi-million-dollar project for our high school. That that bond had been turned down before, and because it had, that's the decision the school board made in terms of making it a more public operation. So again, I encourage you, as this goes on, it really seems to be a PR issue with deciding anything. If you're not talking, union contracts or personnel evaluations, there's a very limited number of issues that allows you to hold closed meetings. So I encourage you, keep the process open and listen to all the constituents. We're concerned about doubling space, perhaps that we have here for after-school program that may not be needed in the library. Boys and Girls Club, this is a marvelous space for them to inherit. Love some money to come out of it, but again, it's a space that they now have access to, at least partially, and could have more. And there would be no need to duplicate that space in the library. Thank you.
Thank you. David Oblovi, followed by Hope Atmore.
Thank you. Good evening. After 2 years of trying, I've given up on expecting you to listen to me, so I'm just going to say this very quickly. This is 980 signatures. 980 people are telling you, the three of you sitting there in the middle especially, they're telling you something. Ever since this library project was resurrected a year and a half ago, it has been one of exclusion and denial. People who have wanted to be a part of the process have been vilified. People who wanted to be part of the process have been against the library. People are here tonight to hold books up to support the library. I resent that. The notion that I don't like books or want a library is ludicrous. But the point is, when you do that, when you exclude the people, and we've seen this over the last 4 years, this is what you end up with. Notice of intent to circulate petition. Notice is hereby given by the persons whose names appear hereon, ensuring that the treasured and historically significant downtown corridor of Half Moon Bay is protected from permanent harm by requiring a majority vote of the people prior to beginning construction of any public or private building of greater than 18,000 square feet. That's the next one for next year. If that's the only input we're going to have, and this isn't just me, this is your community. If that's all we're going to have, that's our only resort. And this is ridiculous. We can do better than this. Thank you.
Thank you. Hope Atmore, followed by Dave Shore.
Thank you, Mayor Fraser and council members, for your time and your continued work toward a new library. I want to especially thank Councilmember Rick Kowalczyk and Councilmember Deborah Penrose, who, among 9 others, gave up 2 full days to tour buildings and to hear from 5 amazingly qualified architects. Your thoughtful questions and enthusiastic engagement allowed our group to unanimously recommend Nolan Tam as the architectural firm for the Half Moon Bay Library project. The quality of the firms that applied was amazing, and it was no easy task to decide on one. However, through the discussions had and the presentations given, it is clear that our group was able to recommend a firm that will create the most appropriate, versatile, and forward-thinking design for a library for the coast. As a mom and a community member, I am thrilled to see the project moving forward. The need and push for a new library has been ongoing for well over a decade, and to finally see progress and a clear path is amazing. I personally have been talking about this since my son was in kindergarten, and if the project stays on schedule, he will be able to enjoy the new library by the 7th grade. As the president of the Friends of the Library, I'm even more excited about what a larger and improved library space will mean for our entire coast side. This past year, the Friends of the Library was able to fund just shy of $30,000 for programming through our membership dues, book sale, and ongoing book sale carts in the library. With increased space, even more programs will be offered to those in the community who rely on them, and the Friends will continue to meet those funding needs. We are thrilled that staff has recommended moving forward, and we urge you to approve the contract with Nolan Tam, unanimously recommended by our working group, and bring us one step closer to the new library that the coast side desperately needs. I also want to say I'm very excited about the process that Nolan Tam will go through to engage the community, and I think that that's one of the reasons that we felt so comfortable recommending them. We know that they're going to do another entire round of information gathering, so that anybody who does feel like they haven't been heard yet will have that opportunity. So I really look forward to that process taking place and making sure that people who do feel like they're not being heard can come in and give their input and their desires for that new library. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Dave Shore, followed by Harvey Rohrbach.
Good evening. Thanks. Thanks to council members, staff, the contractors who are here who are going to be working on our new library. I think it's pretty obvious at this point there is concern in the community about the size, scope, scale, and design of the library. It's also obvious from the agenda, from the packet that's been presented, from what Mr. Dowdy said, that the public is going to be engaged. So hopefully David Oblovi and others' concerns that they were not heard in the past will be addressed, and I think that's very important. But it's also important to recognize that there's been a period of time we've gone through where people are imagining insult and slight where none exists or is intended, and a lot of the arguments that you're hearing here tonight, which are perceived as roadblocks to the library, are actually largely manufactured arguments. And when you look at the actual facts and numbers that people might be debating, a lot of those arguments fall like a sandcastle. In particular, there's objections to three things. The lease revenue bond purported to be much more expensive than a GO bond. An assumption I've heard the signature gatherers themselves state that repayment of the bond will cost $1 million per year and will cost $1,600 per person in the city of Half Moon Bay. Let's take this opportunity for anybody in the room who's willing to listen to just look at the facts. From the Kitahata report to the city of in January of this year, GO bonds, 3.97%. Lease revenue bonds, 4.13%. That's a difference of 0.16 of 1% difference in interest rate. Assuming the same amount of money financed under either scheme, you've got a very, very similar repayment package. And in fact, again from the Kitahata report, right now the county has very generously offered to fund over 50% of the project. The city has another $6 million allocated already. Let's assume that the project doesn't get reduced below its $22 million price tag. There's $18 million already funded and allocated. That leaves $4 million to be funded. Based on the analysis by Kitahata, that results in an annual payment under lease revenue bond of under $280,000 per year. With a city budget of $12 million per year, that's hardly going to break the bank, and it breaks down to $23.27 per person in Half Moon Bay per year, not the $1,600 that's been misstated. I will add that it is a misdemeanor in the state of California to make misstatements in furtherance of the gathering of signatures for a ballot petition. It is rarely prosecuted, but I just want people to consider that. Additionally, the lease revenue bonds require no repayment until late in 2019. So when you look at all of this, you're looking at $23.27 per person in Half Moon Bay, not starting until 2019, with the county providing over half of our funding. I'd like to be more positive tonight, but I think it's very important to get some of these actual facts based on numbers that the city is actually working with out there, as opposed to some of the misinformation that has been spread willfully. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Harvey Rohrback.
Good evening again. Harvey Rohrback, representing Advocates for Open Government. I too am a member of Friends of the Library. I too think that we need a new library. That's not the issue. The Advocates for Open Government believe that the process of selection of the committee, of the meeting to select an architect, is a clear violation of the Brown Act. Don't take my word for it. We have a lawyer named Gary Patton who's looked at this issue. He's the same lawyer who won a suit that cost the CUSD $50,000. So you should really understand what open government really is about. We're not saying that the library should not occur. We are saying that the selection process, the meetings, Councilmember Kowalczyk said he was secretly recorded, as if that was a horrible thing. That was a good thing. It was only because we were able to find out about this secret meeting and secretly record him that some of the illegal, in my opinion, acts have occurred. So AFOG is requesting that you correct and cure the process by going back and having an open selection process where the members are vetted before the city council, where they submit Form 700s, where the meetings are open, agendized, and in Half Moon Bay. That is what open government is about. Thank you.
Thank you. Wendy Schaefer, followed by Ida Cook.
Hi, thank you for letting me speak. I'm Wendy Schaefer, a Half Moon Bay resident and with the Friends of the Library. I just want to say that I'm very pleased that the city is going forward with this library project. I know that there's been a lot of input from the community and that the input gathering is planned to continue. I feel that the process to select the architect was very good. It involved representatives, including elected officials at various levels of government and different community members representing different interests. I also support the funding mechanisms that were identified for the library. I also wanted to express that it's very important, obviously, that we keep this process moving as quickly as possible, because the longer it takes, the more it's going to cost. Delays are going to cost us all a lot of money. And the only other thing I wanted to say was we had the process, we collected input, we had wish lists, we had conceptual designs. Nobody is saying that's to the design. The design process has not yet commenced, so people who are getting all bent out of shape are all concerned about this wish list that they're perceiving is going to be the library can rest assured that the process to continue to collect input is going to continue, and then a design process will happen after that, so they should just take the opportunities that they can to get their input and not say that this wish list is what's going to happen and that it represents just a few people's wishes and that's what we're going to get and that's why it's so expensive. Thanks.
Thank you. Ida Cook, followed by Dan Haggerty.
On? Okay. Good evening, Mayor, City Council, and audience. I echo and support so many of the comments made by previous speakers in support of the library, and also in support of open government, and in support of engaging the entire community in the library process. So I won't repeat any of that, but I just want to address one specific, which is in the staff notes that I read. It mentioned that the schedule of outreach meetings that are going to happen. And I recall that the project manager some time ago said that the design, the size, the cost, nothing was engraved in stone. Those were his words. But from what I've been reading in that staff report and hearing, a lot is indeed engraved in stone. And a lot of the engraving was based on a dated survey done some time ago of 2,000 people. And we all agree we need information, we need engagement of the entire community. So in the staff report, the proposed project schedule said that 4 user group focus meetings are scheduled or planned. And the various user group constituencies are described as Half Moon Bay, the Hispanic population, and the North and South Coast. The 4 meetings, and this is the outreach program that is planned by the project manager and is being touted, I guess, in the staff report. The 4 meetings are planned for Friday, September 4th, Friday, September 11th, Friday, September 18th, and Friday, September 25th. And the place and time have not been scheduled. So to me, this seems very limited and a very short track program, because it doesn't allow adequate participation, to my mind, from the public. How many interested residents will actually be able to attend a single meeting at one specific date at a specified time and place? I suggest that this schedule be augmented with more meetings, and in particular neighborhood meetings. At the same time, I also suggest that a new survey of the community be obtained, a survey designed and vetted by the City Council, be mailed to each Half Moon Bay resident, asking for their unbiased and fresh input on design, size, and cost. But let's recall, Half Moon Bay residents are not only paying for 1/2 the total cost of the library, on top of what we are also paying as our share of the county contribution. In addition, we will pay for full maintenance of the library. I think we should think carefully, slow down, put more thought into the process, obtain more input from the entire community, engage more people, and allow the voters to have a say. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Dan Haggerty, followed by Deb Kessler.
Mayor, members of the council, members of the public. Of course, libraries are great. I love libraries. I have many fond memories as a kid being able to walk or ride my bicycle to the library. I want to echo all the concerns about scale. I want to be able to walk down historic Main Street, turn the corner, and I don't want to see a terrific change in the feel of the small town of Half Moon Bay. I live in El Granada. I visit Half Moon Bay very often. I also want to say that, there has been a lot of concerns that have been expressed, and I have yet to feel like the concerns have been fully acknowledged or any level of mitigation. The issues are traffic. To have such a large library in Half Moon Bay as our beautiful Highway 1 is getting more and more crowded, the folks in the Mid-Coast will eventually be less and less able to access the library. I believe that we will have a community center up in the Mid-Coast in the future, and I think it would be great to have a small, some type of a small satellite branch up there to serve locally so that the kids can walk, the adults too can walk and visit their library and get all of the, at the small scale without taxing the traffic on Highway 1. I just want to say that I know that this process has been going on. I can't remember when I first saw a kiosk at the Pumpkin Festival and the markets, the farmers markets. This has been a heavily this whole thing has been pushed quite a bit. I've always walked up to the kiosks, and in the process of waiting to get a closer look, I'm always hearing the same comments that I just made as far as scale and the appropriateness for the small town. So, of course, we need a good library. Of course, that's not the question, but it's definitely the scale and the small town feel, and the whole parking, fiasco. To say that it's okay to use the city street parking solely for such a large new library is just unacceptable. It would just put too much of a burden on to the people that live in Half Moon Bay, and they would have cars in front of their house all the time, and all of the other, the new auditorium, all of the other things that are happening right in there, the Cunha School, that'd be just, it should be to scale so that not only Half Moon Bay isn't impacted, but the whole community of the coast side. Thank you. I'm sorry if I thought that asking you to approve this tonight you would still make these drastic, listen to these concerns. I feel that I have to ask you to urge you to not approve this, because I think it's the only way to stop, take a few steps back, make the communications, new surveys, and get a better feel from what the public wants. Thank you.
Thank you. Deb Kessler, followed by Jimmy Benjamin.
Thank you, Mayor Fraser, Council. So, in the interest of full disclosure, I'm going to tell you I live in El Granada. I am not Half Moon Bay. I will also tell you that I am on the board of the Friends of the Library. But more importantly, I think for the last 14 years that I have lived on the coast side, I've been a volunteer at the library. I volunteer about 5 hours a week. I kind of do whatever they want me to do, but I'm there, and I certainly see everything that's going on in the library. And just as I am dismayed by the tremendous increase in traffic over the 14 years I've lived here on the coast side, I am dismayed by the increased use in the inadequate space in the library. So I see tutoring going on for both adults and children in the library. The Pause for Tales, which is a really fantastic nonprofit, or it may even just be a volunteer through the Humane Society, where a volunteer brings in her therapy dog and kids read to the dog as a way to help improve their confidence in reading. So that happens in the stacks of nonfiction. So when I want to get a nonfiction book, I'm stepping over Riley the dog and the 6 or 7-year-old who's reading to him. That's not great. The library was built, so I have heard, with a community room when it was built in 1971, long before my time here. So that room is now the children's room, where all the children's books are. We have no community room. We have no community room in this community. Programs are often held here in the Ted Adcock Center because there's no space for them in the library. I sometimes do the pre-program introduction on behalf of the Friends, since we fund those programs that happen. And I have to come here because the library doesn't have space to accommodate the number of people. After school is noisy, and I know the staff takes complaints constantly about how noisy it is during the school year after school, but there's no space. And don't we want kids to be hanging out in the library instead of wandering aimlessly until their parents come home and who knows what they're getting up to? But at least in the library, it is a safe place where maybe they're getting their homework done. In terms of the staff, I have no idea how they get accomplished, what they get accomplished. It's unbelievable to me. And somehow the little space that they have gets taken up by more and more things, like I think it's a 7-foot-long refrigerator that was put in this summer to accommodate the lunches that were required by the county to be served. We, as the Friends, have an ongoing book sale. Wendy Schaefer, who already spoke, is our queen for the book sale. And that's largely how we make the money to support these programs. And despite the fact that we bought a container to house our books, they're still taking up all the space in the staff room. So in closing, and I'm sorry I ran over my 3 minutes, but we have to take care of our community. Our community needs access to internet, needs access to the programs we can provide. And if we are not investing in our human capital, what's going to happen to us as a community? Thank you.
Thank you. Jimmy Benjamin, followed by Alan Alfano.
Good evening, Mayor Fraser, council people. Nice to see you this evening. It's an honor to see Supervisor Groom with us and hear a lot of passion from our community. I have known Walter. He's a gentle man from Kentucky, soft-spoken. You've seen him many times here. I've never seen him speak as passionately as he did tonight. And I want to be clear that he and many others who have expressed concerns about the project as it stands are not opponents of the library. I think they have a lot of respect for Hope and your colleagues. I think that is not a question about your intention. I think they feel that they have been unfairly characterized as opposing internet access or opposing programs that the Friends so graciously support. They are not your enemies. And it's important for us to have a civil discussion because that is what a public forum like a library is really about. I have concerns about the source of funding for this project. I think if this were a bond that voters were taxed on, it would be easier for me to support it, although I do have concerns about scale. But I am deeply concerned about seeing this money come out of the general budget. I would gently remind the City Council that when this item was introduced, a member of the City Council told us enthusiastically, who might be concerned about the Kehoe water course, that we shouldn't worry, that there's going to be plenty of money to handle that. And I trust that that will in fact be the case if you decide to go forward with this project. I have no quarrel with Mr. Shore. I appreciate his comments. He's actually a neighbor of mine. I believe he's a musician, actually, and I'm a guitar player. I learned that speed is the byproduct of accuracy when you're learning your scales or other things. And what I'm hoping is that by choosing our course carefully rather than moving as fast as we can, we'll do a better job and we'll hit the right notes and get a harmonic result for the community. Finally, there were several people calling for another survey, and I realized that for proponents that must be agonizing, so I apologize for that, what must be very frustrating to hear. But you know, library proponents will remember that the Greeks had a process called the Oracle at Delphi, where people brought ideas together, they thought through what they were going to do, the ideas were shared publicly, and then they came around and had a second pass at them. In other words, this is an idea steeped in history that I'm sure council members will appreciate. And Mr. Haggerty's comments concerning various impacts could be characterized as trying to understand the cumulative impact of this project in conjunction with others in the area. It's a CEQA issue and it needs to be addressed and anticipated because it will need to be addressed. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Alan Alifano, followed by Vicky Cormack.
Good evening again, Madam Mayor and council members and city staff. I'm not so sure that the last comparison to Greece is probably something I would have used tonight, considering the shape that that country's in right now. Let's take a step back. The speakers tonight talked about process, openness, and scale. Well, excuse me, but isn't the process exactly what's happening here tonight? The people behind me came here tonight because they have concerns, either 100% for the library or for the library with some concerns. That's what this process is about tonight. This process has been going on for months and for years, and it's not done. The process will continue. And I think the steps the council has taken, choosing the project manager, looking to choose an architect, people that are proven in their fields and know how to bring, as you said earlier tonight, projects in either at or under budget. So it's part of the process. That's why the people are here tonight. That's why I'm here tonight. Scale. I am not a library specialist. I don't design libraries for a living. You are going to hire people that do that. And they're going to come back to you, the council, and the community and suggest to you the right size and scope for that project on that 1 acre parcel. It might be 25,000 feet. It might be 20,000 feet. None of us know that answer right now because we haven't got to that point in the process yet. The things that were shown at farmers markets, at city council meetings, at neighborhood meetings throughout the city for the last few years were concepts. It was trying to get a groundswell about a new library. The county has jumped on and committed over half of the 22 million along with the JPA. The city has put away $6 million. And remember, what happens 3 years after from now in 2019? The city picks up $1 million a year when the Beechwood bonds are paid off. We can pay for this library. But again, all the comments that were made tonight, they're being answered. At the end of the day, when this process is complete, where's it going to end up? On your table. It'll be your decision to make. But I have no problem with the process you all have put in place. It's working.
Thank you. Vicky Cormack.
Hello. Thank you for letting me speak about this. I have a great love of the library when I'm not out in the community meeting people and visiting the beach. I spend all my time at the library. There's all kinds of resources. People I know that are seniors come there. Children I know that have nowhere to go there. Children that have a home to, go there instead. There's a great place to gather, and I think it is the center and the heart of the community. That's my personal feeling. It's used for groups when there are no places for groups to meet. They can meet outside, although as Deb said, there's just not that much room. It can be noisy, but it's friendly and it's welcoming. It's like going to someone's house where they're making cookies and offering you milk. And they do now offer a food program, I understand. There are resources for everyone. They'll teach people how to use the resources. It's in many languages. If people don't know what to do, they'll find a way to help you. And for me, that is the heart of the democratic world. So I'm just here to advocate that the new library get built swiftly with thoughtfulness and consideration, and I thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. And Judy Macias.
Madam Mayor and City Council members, thank you for letting me speak. I've been a member of the Half Moon Bay Library since 1969, if longevity counts for anything. And I do remember the community room. Many wonderful organizations started there. It was a very key part of our community. I've been a very small part of the planning process since I joined the Friends of the Library, kind of late as a matter of fact, because I was working and just thought I was too busy. And the first meeting I went to had 6 people in it and a chairman who was leaving. And thanks to this wonderful group of people we have here and the enthusiasm of many people, and not everyone I heard speak tonight was at any of those meetings, so I really congratulate the people who were there early and were some part of the planning process as I was. I went to whatever meetings were open. I went to the farmer's market, other meetings at the library. I was just astounded at how much effort Annie and the library staff put into making it an open process that I could see. I'm also the founder and chairman of Village of the Coast Side, and we hope to be a community of active adults 50 and over. We're trying to create a virtual village. And the existence of the library will be a key factor in our development because, as one of the other speakers said, we count on the space in the meeting room for classes and programs and activities. We hope to greatly increase the resources available here in Half Moon Bay and on the coast in general. So this is a golden opportunity. Please don't let it go by. The planets are aligned now. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our public speakers on this. We will bring this back to council at this time. Council members, do you have comments? Vice Mayor Kowalczyk.
Thank you for all the speakers tonight, all of your comments, those in favor of the library, those interested in making some changes, and those who want to stop the project. My comments will come in 2 sets, 2 sections. One, I want to make some general comments about the library project, sort of to give some feedback based on what I've heard tonight. And then I want to give some comments about Noel and Tam, which is in fact the subject of this agenda item. I am a friend of the Half Moon Bay Library. I think many of us are. I am strongly in favor of a new library for our community because I am well aware of how underserved our community is. The couple of things that came up that I want to mention. First of all, lease revenue bonds. If a member of the community is concerned about this financing mechanism, I want you to reach out to this council. If a member of this council does not understand this financial mechanism, I beg you to work with our financial staff. As was supported by a member of our community who was a financial advisor in the Clinton administration, this is a perfectly acceptable and common financial instrument. How will it work for us? We will use the savings from paying off our long-term debt 20 years early as the basis for financing our shared library, at least a good chunk of it. Think about that. We've become healthy. We're paying off our long-term debt. That will free up revenue to the city. Lease revenue bonds. That's where the revenue comes from. If there is a need for more understanding, perhaps, because it seems to be a concern, perhaps we'll have a workshop or a study session on the topic, how finance works. I'm happy to take people through it, and if our council members are not clear on it, I think they should spend time with finance on that. Our library, I want to talk about one more thing, the process so far. If you were not one of the more than 2,000 people who gave input to the early ideas, that's okay, because there is more process ahead to give input. If you have desire to be heard and you have interests that need to be shared, we are problem solvers. If there is a feature for the library that you're passionate about adding, if there's a feature for the library that you're passionate that should not be part of our structure, there is an opportunity to share that in English, in Spanish, in the city, and in the county. That is part of the process. The library project has 6 phases. Conceptual design, widespread outreach, something Councilmember Ruddick was interested in when we supported putting budget aside for project management, was value engineering and cost engineering into the project to make sure it meets our budgets. In this process, in concept design, conceptual design, the community will have additional opportunity for input. And we're problem solvers. If our community needs more input, well, we can figure that out. But that is no reason to stop the project, because we already have a process for input. If we need more, we can provide more. The second piece of the project is schematic design. Guess what happens in the second phase of the project? More input to the schematic design. Did we get it right? Third phase is design. Guess what happens in the third phase? More input. Fourth phase, construction, technical review, and input, etc., etc. If you do not feel that you've had the opportunity, you will have the opportunity. If you were not engaged early in the process, you can be engaged now in the process. I think when this project got real, a lot of people in the community said, whoa, 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 I didn't give my input. You still can. That is the process. However, that is not an argument to stop the project. We need to choose to build it or to not build it. There are 2 camps here. We can build it and we can give input to the process. We can refine it, we can shape it. The design needs to fit our community. It needs to be a size appropriate for our community. It needs to provide programming that is needed for our community, and it needs to provide meeting space for our community. And I say that specifically because some of the input I heard personally from the Latino community is our groups don't have places to meet. I have children studying in hallways in churches, and we can do better than that for our community. I want to move forward with this process. More than enough opportunity will be provided to give input, and if there's not, this council has the authority to create more input opportunities. We don't have to stop the project to plan financing for it, to start conceptual design, and to get additional input from our community. That is all accounted for. It's very clear, it's in the documents. If you want to discuss it more, I'm happy to discuss it more. I want to move on. I wanted to address those important things. But I want to move on to Nolan Tam, because I think that is really critical that we understand this organization. There was a 2-phase RFP process in which 18 firms gave input. Of those, 5 were selected by a technical review committee, and we assessed them. We visited their structures they designed, we talked with them, we questioned them. Staff called the references, staff called references they didn't provide. We have a great perspective on the organizations, and particularly on Nolan Tam. They are exceptional. Of the 5 finalists, all of them were great. 2 of them were just wonderful. And through our dialogue in our meeting, Nolan Tam got unanimous support from myself, Supervisor Groom, Councilmember Penrose, and the rest of that meeting. And we made our recommendation to staff. Staff did further due diligence and is recommending Nolan Tam. Their work is impressive. I would invite the community to visit Los Gatos Library, a completely inappropriate library for Half Moon Bay, a totally wonderful library for Los Gatos. This was the perfect library for their financial needs, for their space, and for their community. Our library, based on their ability to meet those requirements, I'm very confident that they will be able to meet the needs of our community and have a library that is not an imposing structure, that provides the proper space and organization for the programming needs of the library that serves our children and our seniors, ourselves. One of the interesting findings from the Los Gatos Library, you think our library is crowded now. That's sort of a good thing, but think of all the children and all the people who are not using the library. Something great happened in Los Gatos that I thought was particularly impressive. And I don't know what the word for it is. I call it rise. So they had about 10 to 12 teenagers make their way from the high school every day to use the old library. They created a proper space with proper programming. And during our tour, it was pointed out that approximately 110 teenagers use the library every afternoon. I want our teenagers to have that opportunity. Our teenagers deserve that opportunity. And I think Nolan Tam will serve us well. They were really, really superb, and they're here tonight. So thank you for coming tonight. And with that, I moved to adopt a resolution awarding a consultant services contract to Nolan Tam Architects and Planners for architectural and related design services for the Half Moon Bay Library project in an amount not to exceed $2,269,984 and authorizing the city manager or her designee to negotiate and execute the final agreement.
And that is a motion, but I think people will still have conversation about this, so we have a motion on the table. We have a motion on the table. I'm sure there's some discussion.
Yeah, I would frankly like to hear from the architects before making a decision. I have questions for them that only they can really give me the answer to. So before we decide to go ahead and hire them, although I definitely recommend them, I want to see that my questions are answered.
And Councilmember Ruddock and Councilmember Muller, did you have any questions before we bring up the architects?
No, point of order, the motion was made and there was a second, and now we can have discussion.
Yes, correct. Did you have some
questions for the consultant as well?
Okay. Are representatives of Nolan here? Yes.
Good evening. I'm Chris Knoll, principal with Nolan Tam Architects. And I'm joined by Abe Jason, will be the project manager on the project.
Well, thank you.
Bring it up a little bit.
And
sorry.
Councilmember Penrose, what questions do you have? I know you're familiar with this architect.
Yes. Hi.
Hi.
Great presentation, by the way.
Thank you very much.
Can you describe for me your assumptions behind what seems to be, to me, a very brief timetable? In particular, I'm interested in the level of the proposed CEQA process. Do you intend to do an EIR, negative or mitigated declaration?
Our role in the project is to supply sort of materials that will be supportive of the CEQA process, but we are not leading the CEQA process itself. So I probably can't really address the timing of that, but it is not an unusual process to be running an early design process in conjunction with the CEQA process. So as we develop the design concept, it will support the CEQA documentation.
Yeah, it just seems 16 weeks is a pretty short timetable to obtain a CEQA.
Councilmember Penrose, I think our attorney can speak to that.
Sure.
I was just going to note that that would be a better question to pose to city staff than to our architect. They're not necessarily in control of that process. So if
but it's their timetable, isn't it?
Reed, could you bring your microphone a little closer?
Certainly.
Thank you.
I would pose that question to city staff. That's not really within the purview of the architect's control.
I was under the impression that that was part of their proposal, was a 16-week timeline for that. Is that something city staff decided?
Again, I would suggest giving city staff an opportunity to be responsive here. If you'd allow John to take the microphone for a moment, he might be able to answer
Sure.
both your questions.
Thank you.
And I'm sure they can work together up there to answer all of them.
Great.
We have proceeded on the basis of, with the consultant's choice with the project management, and through this process, have always had a schedule of looking at commencing construction in the fall of 2016. So everything and all schedules have been backed up and based on that schedule. With regard to CEQA, we will comply fully with CEQA. We will evaluate this project. We have not landed because it wouldn't be appropriate to land on what that document is at this point. We are looking at proceeding with conversation and ultimate adoption of whatever documentation is required and necessary in conjunction with the schematic drawings, which is a typical process where you have the architectural elements, the architectural design, the elevations, you have the land laid out, you have the site plans, all of those things, and that's the appropriate time, consistent and with every architect's design, and where we ultimately see all projects going to CEQA. So from that perspective, that is the process that has been laid out.
So you intend to go for a full CEQA?
We will comply with CEQAs, and ultimately the Planning Commission, unless deferred to the council, will ultimately be asked to take action on that document.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Did you have any more questions on your list there?
Yeah. I wanted to know if Nolan Tam was prepared to come up with a design should the community speak to reducing the scope. Are you prepared to design a smaller library?
We're prepared to design any library that the community feels is the right library. We're going to be doing community outreach efforts where we're going to be listening very carefully to what the community has to say in various contexts and various sort of groups that will provide us input. We will discuss these with the technical group that we're working with, and I think collectively we will make decisions or we will be directed to design a library of the appropriate size. So if it is 25,000 square feet or less than 25,000 square feet, we're totally prepared to sort of meet the needs of the community. That is our job.
Great. And then the other question that I had is about the community outreach. How do you plan to reach the community? What I saw was 4 meetings, one for the Hispanic community, one for Half Moon Bay, and one for the coast. I can't remember what the 4th one was. It doesn't seem to be allowing enough time for input from the community. Are you willing to expand that to include more meetings or longer meetings or different types of meetings? For instance, somebody suggested neighborhood meetings.
Absolutely. I think, we sort of designated these sort of 4 primary community meetings because we wanted to make sure that we hit the primary areas of the overall community, the coastal community, that, we could do it. So that's why we added the north and the south, to make sure that we weren't just, looking at Half Moon Bay. And we felt that the Hispanic community was often an underheard part of the community, and we wanted to make a special effort to reach out to the Hispanic community and elicit as much feedback as we can. But that is sort of just a start. We do expect to be coming to various community events with kiosks or sort of like at the Pumpkin Festival and the Farmers Market, and there'll be other places that we will come. And if it is felt that it's not enough, the 4 meetings that are sort of planned right now, and we're directed to, have some more, absolutely. We're sort of working under a fairly compressed time schedule, trying to move this project forward expeditiously, so we would fit them in. Right now, we've got them sequenced pretty closely together, and that's good, and we want to sort of move forward to get that input.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Go ahead.
I would just also, and the question was, what's a stakeholder earlier in the session, in the meeting, and I would say basically stakeholders, probably two people who have a similar idea of thoughts and things, but we'll have to define what that is. But there's also in this process the idea of stakeholder meetings and groups where the consultants and the folks come in and we talk. They're not necessarily in a public forum, they're not in a public meeting, but you gather folks who are of some thought in the process to gather their thoughts and interest and concerns, and you go through that process. So not only is there this idea of the public process, which is sort of what we've been going through in a general plan sense, but there's more, I think, of the sense of that closer and more intimate stakeholder meetings with again, trying to gather information and thoughts from all perspectives to look at that. I want to also just remind the community in particular that the size is an issue and certainly under discussion and something to talk about. But we also have a partnership here, and so this is not necessarily just the decision of the city. There are two other partners, a major funding partner and the operating partner, that will have to come to some agreement with the size of this facility, the operations, and the types of programs that are going to be operated in that. So it is not just an autonomous decision of the city, although ultimately you have the decision, thumbs up or thumbs down, I guess. But from a broader perspective, there are a collaborative effort that we're trying to work through with other partners.
Yeah, one more question about the timetable. The timeline is to have the library under construction by November 2016. Is that correct? You begin construction by November 2016?
We've looked at it, and I think it's pretty clear in the documentation. We've looked at several options. One of those would be to commence demolition and site work on the site potentially earlier than that to take advantage of pre-winter construction season. That's one option that's been discussed and out there, of separating those issues, but publicly bidding them, obviously, but separating the issues. So we're looking at various schedules, and frankly, the schedule that was put out is the start of a schedule, and I hope we're not absolutely held to the schedule at that point. Similar to the conversations with Mac Dutra and others, that we have to realize that things change, that the process has changed, and if there is a need to engage the community more and work through that process, we'll have to adjust accordingly and move forward. But you have to have a goal and an idea where you're trying to reach, and then we kind of figure out and adjust from that point.
Thank you.
Could I make one sort of addition about the community meetings? When I was talking about the 4 meetings, it was just the 4 in that first phase. There will be 3 other meetings during schematic design, design development, and construction documents. So there will be further meetings where we come back and check in and saying, did we listen to you? Did we get it right? Is this looking right to you? And we can still make adjustments to design at those points.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Additional questions?
I have a question for staff. Mr. Dowdy? So I also am interested in the underlying assumptions to the timeline. Mm-hmm. So we've addressed CEQA, which seems to be rather vague at this point. I do think 16 weeks is somewhat questionable. But I'd like to know more about what you intend for the construction letting process, mm-hmm. the bidding process, design build. What's the assumption underlying the timetable?
I'll take a whack, and then Reed can tell me I said it all wrong. Basically, we have been looking at various methods at the request of our project management team to look at alternate deliveries of projects primarily designed around getting the best value for the dollar while still meeting public bid requirements. Mr. Galogli has landed that 2 of those options that were suggested by the project management team are not available to us. Design build is available as an alternative, but will require significant efforts and material and information and documentation and approvals by the council to create the framework for that. And we have not seriously thought about whether that is a delivery method that we're even suggesting to you. Frankly, I think that we are probably looking at a pretty traditional public works, public bid project. With that, I think the only distinction that we're looking at potentially is the ability to split between the site work, demolition and site work, because we have asbestos removal we have to deal with. We're also trying to deal with weather and not having a mess. With that, we're also looking at potential of trying to look at how we can work with the school schedule and not have significant impacts to Cunha while we're doing demolition and all that work, particularly related to the site work. That may be a variation that we look at and ask the council to consider with that. I think all of those, each of those will come. The other issue that we've looked at is pre-qualified for the subcontractors pre-qualification. That again requires some additional work, but is a proven way and available to the city to get the best price and the best contractors available in certain trades, particularly the high trades of the electrical, plumbing, and things of that nature. So there are all of those things on the table. That's what our project management team is there. Any and all questions that were raised by them were sent to Reed and to our legal team to determine whether those in fact were available to us.
I'm guessing that the decision on the delivery process will be made by the city council?
Absolutely.
Comparing alternatives?
Absolutely.
That's good. And what would be the timeline on making that decision?
We haven't really put the timeline on that. I mean, obviously there are things that would, if we are recommending an alternate method, there are timeframes that we'll have to look back with that. Certainly, we would have to be making some decisions within probably the next 6 months to 8 months on what method we're looking at the maximum time frame, really, frankly. And those certainly will come back for consideration and direction from the council.
So will our participation in the State Controller's Office Uniform Public Construction Accounting Practices Act, is that going to guide our bidding? I notice that they have certain thresholds that we must abide by as a member of that. Thresholds like for construction and formal bidding, et cetera.
As a general law, the city of Half Moon Bay is constrained to adhere to the public contract code. The city will be following that public contract code in going forward with this project. I know there were some sort of amorphous concerns raised over purported bid splitting and the use of the CM at risk process, and I can give you a little information about both of those now. The bid splitting is not actually an issue. It's inappropriate and it's unlawful to split up a project with the purpose and intent of avoiding the public contract code and using a public bidding process. But splitting up and segmenting, if you will, for lack of a better word, a project like this is totally appropriate, and we're not avoiding the public contract code or avoiding publicly bidding this project in any sense. The request for a design build process, a CM at risk process, I think that inquiry came out of a Public Records Act request where some documents were released because they were public records that were just communications between city staff and our project manager, who was doing his best to come up with ways to save the city money, which is what we hired them to do. Apologies, by proposing these other alternatives that project manager was just trying to save the city money. Some of those alternatives are acceptable if you're a county and you're building a project over $1 million, but that's a specific carve out in the public contract code that allows counties to go forward with those types of bidding processes. Cities don't have the ability yet. There's actually currently a pilot program in Los Angeles. I think it's the Community Unified School District is now allowed to use the CM at risk process for a specific project as sort of a test program to see whether it will be rolled out to other public agencies. But we will be following the public contract code in all aspects. So I hope that was responsive.
Yes, going back to sort of breaking up the project to demolition and construction, it seems to me with the prospect of dust impacts, toxics impacts, potential toxic impacts. If there's asbestos, that's a problem. Doing separate CEQA for demolition and separate CEQA for construction. Am I right? Wouldn't demolition require its own attention?
I'll let John.
We are not looking to segment CEQA in any way. We are required by law to consider all the implications and all the issues as the project as a whole, from all aspects of the project, from demolition to new construction, ultimately with that. So we will be looking and evaluating in the CEQA process the entire project and the entirety of all actions and activities related to it.
Informationally, I believe we had some kind of study that was recently conducted that I think Alex might be able to identify, or regarding hazardous materials.
Sure. We have gone ahead and, because it's part of the process to have a phase 1 study done, hazardous study done, and that came clean. That is basically just a record search. We also had an asbestos study as well as a lead study. The lead study was clean. The asbestos was actually not significant, although it's expansive because it involves the mastic cover glue underneath all of the carpet, about 5,000 square feet. So it's probably about a $20,000 add-on to the demolition process, but it will require certified demolition experts for that field. But it is not a significant issue. So that's the good news, I think, from that perspective. But those are all part of the pre-CEQA process of trying to look at and evaluate and ascertain what the issues are going to be ahead of us. We've also had geotechnical study done. The good news is that we're allowed to use normal standard foundation systems, so that's a very good and also cost savings issue as well. So we're proceeding with those special studies. Those are all part, again, of both design and the CEQA process.
Great, thanks. I will have some comments as I gather my thoughts here.
Councilmember Mueller.
Well, I'm getting near to ask for the call for the question, but I will respect the comment. I think I got a quick clarification, and I think with the city attorney, the accusations that this procedure has been illegal by a number of speakers. Would you clarify for that? At any time, did the city break the law?
So are you asking me specifically regarding the things I just spoke with Councilmember Penrose, the bid splitting and the CM at risk issues?
Also the Brown Act accusations.
Oh, certainly. So I think Tony Kandati wrote a very responsive letter to the accusations of Brown Act violations. It is what it is. There was no violation of the Brown Act. I know there's many people who disagree and think that there ought to have been a public process, and that is a different thing than there is a legally required public process. And that's a distinction that is important in this case, because every day, cities, counties, special districts throughout the country, throughout the United States, throughout California for sure, staff forms working groups to come to conclusions that they forward on to the city manager to present towards their decision makers. It's not atypical. Not every collection of members of this council, of the public generally, and of staff constitute a legislative body under the Brown Act. I don't really have a silver bullet to respond to some of the accusations that have been leveled here tonight, because I think that they're not based in a correct interpretation of the law. It's a difficult kind of, are you still beating your wife question. There was no violation. There is no need to cure and correct. When you presume that somebody has done something unlawful and then ask them what they're going to do about it, it's difficult to respond, because you're left in the position of saying, if there were a violation, I would agree we would need to cure and correct, but there wasn't one in this case. And I know that that's a distinction that not everyone appreciates, whether there ought to be and whether there legally was required to be. In this case, the city did nothing improper under the law. Whether the council wants to open up all of its meetings, every staff executive discussion that occurs, any technical working group that gets formed, I don't think that's a great policy, but on a case-by-case basis, that's within your prerogative to make a decision on how this thing goes forward.
Thank you. And then a quick response through the mayor. Are we getting off this agenda item a little too far by trying to reach too far into the actual operations of hiring an architect tonight? I feel like we are pushing the envelope by getting away from the agenda item of strictly hiring the architect. And then if we want to work on all the details, which we will, I think that's a proper agenda item. But I think we are pushing the envelope on this agenda item by getting into specific questions of individuals. That's my opinion, a non-legal opinion, but just from personal experiences as a leader.
Councilmember Reddick, you had some last thoughts?
I do have some last thoughts that I want to share with you. I've been very concerned since the 2014 election with the villainization, if you will, of people asking questions about the library, the scale of the library, the scope of the library, the financing. It started during the campaign. You know, I was told I was anti-library, anti-child. Other candidates were told the same thing. And that sort of attitude on the part of supporters of the library, the most active supporters, I find very problematic. You have to ask yourself, you know, what are libraries all about? Libraries are about, you know, the democracy of knowledge. They're about inclusiveness. Somebody earlier making a presentation, the lady who had the Aspen Institute report, talked about, you know, the library is a trusted place and that we have to get rid of our, you know, old notions about libraries, you know, stay away from nostalgia. Well, the library is a place for the democracy of knowledge. I don't find to be bad nostalgia. I think that's the sort of thing that needs to be carried through, not just in the construction of the new library, but the process. And yes, I am a process person. I believe that process is like, you know, a glass or a tube or a pipe through which things flow. And that pipe, that process, shapes what comes out of it. And the space around it is also shaped by the pipe itself. So if we're not doing a good process, we're not going to end up with a product that is completely, shall I say, it might be successful in the sense that you get what you want, but there's going to be ill will created around it. And I don't think that's good. So when the voters turned down Measure O, the tax measure, the first thing people did was to dismiss them as a small vocal minority, even though council members who asked questions were elected and the voters voted down Measure O. And that's gone on to, we've had reports of petition gatherers, or at least one being assaulted, and witnesses witnessed that assault. We had the Friends of the Library sending out a notice of this meeting talking about, come down to the meeting because there's going to be a small vocal minority that opposes the library. I find that very divisive, and somebody else raised that issue tonight. It seems to me that if people want a good, smooth process, a product that the whole community can get behind, you don't engage in those sort of behaviors. You reach out. And if the process takes 2 years instead of 1 year, so be it, in order to heal the community and make people feel like they're involved and belong, that they make a difference. And I've noticed in the supposed outreach in this contract that we're talking about focus groups, reaching out to specific individuals in the community. You know, I think trust has been violated. The meeting in Foster City to narrow down the selection to one architect was handled badly. The review pointed that out. So how are we going to trust the project going forward? How am I going to trust that the community is represented appropriately in a focus group or individual meetings? Who is going to identify those individuals? Who will participate? Is it going to be the full city council? So the lady who made the presentation earlier this evening talked about the library as a trusted place. If that's going to be the case, we need to start building trust now and making sure this project going forward, you know, places a premium on building trust and openness and transparency. And that we have public forums like this where people can comment, not meetings out of public view, away from, you know, being televised. I think you're going to end up, people are going to fight you. And we don't want that. All of us want a new and improved library. So get rid of the attitude that those of us who ask questions are somehow inferior. You know, the residents of Half Moon Bay are paying for this library 60%. We're paying as residents of Half Moon Bay, and we're paying as residents of the county. So you need to pay attention to the residents of Half Moon Bay and make sure their voices are heard. So because of what I consider a compromise process in selecting the architect, I'm probably going to vote no tonight, and I'm very unhappy about that because I think Nolan Tam looks very good. I think the scope of work looks very good. I've seen their stuff. I don't have any problem with Nolan Tam, but I have a very big problem with the process to date and the behavior of the pro-library people villainizing everybody else just for simply asking questions and participating in the democratic process. I'm really angry about this. So this has to change because I want to participate in this process too and help this library get built, but I don't want to do it in an atmosphere where various individuals are treating the library project as their project. If you support libraries, you support the democratic process and you support inclusiveness. Those things go together. If you don't, then, you know, maybe you don't belong in the process. So that's my point tonight. To go forward, we need a very open and transparent process if I'm going to vote in favor of it moving forward. Tonight, I'm unhappy, and I'm going to register that as a no vote.
Well, thank you for your comments, Council. Thanks, good questions. And public, thank you for sticking around tonight for all your comments, too. You know, we're building a library, and part of the process is to hire an architect. So before we say it's this size or that size, you know, we've got another round of input. And you got an opportunity, if you didn't go to one of the 21 opportunities along the coast in the past to voice your opinion. We're building a library, and if you want to do your input, there's going to be opportunity for you. Let us know what you need. Because nostalgia, yes, we all do. I think we've talked about it before. The first thing as a child that you had that was your own was a library card. That was your own cool thing. And that's why it's so embedded in us. But the libraries that I went to, and I'm checking the age in the room right now, the libraries that all of you went to are a totally different library than there are in cities. We're building a 21st century library, and it's very different from our nostalgia. So the first part of it is to hire an architect, to get input to what this is going to look like. And you can all be a part of it. So there is a motion on the table. There is a second. I will ask the council, all in favor, and the motion was to move forward with awarding a contract for architectural and related design services for the Half Moon Bay Library project. Motion was made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay.
Nay. Nay.
And all abstaining. So we have 3 yes, 1 no, and 1 abstention.
May I make a comment?
We have just made a vote.
Yes. May I make a comment at this point?
Sure.
Thank you. I was one of the group that chose Nolan Tam. I think the world of them as architects. I think it's imperative that we know more about this supposed input from the community that we're going to get. The only example I have in front of me is the supposed input about the general plan, which is going to affect our city for the next 20 years. And I think that process falls very short. We were allowed in our workshops 45 minutes for 8 to 10 people to make a comment for 1 to 2 minutes and then pick out our top priorities. It was an absurd fiasco. It was not a workshop.
Councilmember Penrose?
Yes.
Are we going outside of the scope of hiring an architect right now?
Yes.
Okay, then we will have no more discussion on this. The vote was 3 ayes, 1 noes, and 1 abstention. We've hired an architect. Thank you all for being here tonight. We do have one more item that we have to address, so, 2, excuse me. So we're going to continue. If you could move out quietly, and if you congregate and talk outside, shut those doors. Okay, thank you. And we just have item number 14. We just have 14. We did 17. So we'll continue with item number 14. And it'll take me a minute to find it on my computer if someone would like to read what item number 14 is.
Item 14 is approve a contract with Schaff and Wheeler to provide land survey of Kehoe Ditch, technical analysis of hydrology and hydraulics of the Kehoe Ditch, and general analysis of the upper watershed.
All right, and Councilmember Reddick, were you pulling it as well? I'll let you talk first.
I pulled it because residents expressed an interest in pulling it.
Okay.
And I do think that it behooves us to have a discussion with, if somebody is here from Schaff and Wheeler, or at least Mr. Dowdy, about the scope of work. There's been some questions raised about the scope of work.
Yeah.
And we now have a letter from Jimmy, which I really haven't read in detail.
And I haven't either. So can we just, did you have a question specific to that, or Mr. Dowdy, can you?
Sure, we received it late this afternoon, a letter from Mr. Benjamin. We have had a chance to review that. Schaff and Wheeler did not attend tonight. They weren't asked to attend, frankly, so we'll give them a pass on that and yell at us for that. But we have looked at it. Schaff and Wheeler actually was able to read it before they left the office. And as I indicated to Mr. Benjamin in the back, for the most part, Schaff and Wheeler believes that the scope of work that's being questioned and sort of identified by Mr. Benjamin is covered within the context of this contract, and we are in agreement on issues including the cross-sections, the sources of inflow, all of those areas. I will, the one issue that they've indicated is not included in that scope of work at this point would be the surveying of the adjoining property boundaries for the subdivision. Now, those are already set and should come up anyway in those points. However, if the council is so desiring that we expand the survey work to that point, that could be included in the scope of work. Beyond that, I think from responses in our review of it, basically, we're in agreement with that the scope of work that's being identified as being covered within this. I do want to clarify one issue, and I think it's just a semantics. The letter talks a lot about looking at alternatives and of design and coming with the preferred alternative. This scope of work is for a technical study and technical analysis, not for identification of projects. So it'll be used to help identify and create a project that is grant eligible and grant fundable in particular, and in particular looking at those issues and dealing with it and go from there. So I think that's just a semantic issue in terms of that, but clearly this is the technical study which will lead to development of a project scope and a project design, which will then lead to a conversation with the agencies, and you can get the alphabet soup of agencies. There was a question about which ones, everyone that you can think of, Regional Water Quality Control Board, U.S. Army Corps, all of those that we've been working with, Pillar CETUS, will be included in that work and in that intergovernmental process. So at this point, one of the questions was, where are we with intergovernmental? Our recommendation is to hold on that process until we have the actual technical study to be able to go to them and have them evaluate and look at it, and then help us to form what that project may look like based on the technical analysis. We brought this forward tonight. In part, we were asked to do so. We wanted to bring it up as quickly as we could. We understand there's a desire and a need looking at storm readiness issues, and we want to have this in place and done. So within 90 days to come back to the council, report out to this council, to the community, And if there are interim steps that we can take within reason, we can permit and address an issue as quickly as we possibly can to potentially address issues in this flood season and this rainy season. But barring those issues, we certainly can start the intergovernmental coordination at that point. Thank you.
Thank you. I have some comments, but I'm happy to wait till the speakers address their issues.
Well, we've got a couple of speakers' cards. You're like the Garrity's, a husband and wife coming to speak. So we'll do Walter and then Paulette.
Thank you. Again, I'm Walter Sensing from the city of Half Moon Bay. And my comments will be brief on this. My main concern is that we get the most value that we can from the money that we spend and the time and effort that goes into this. So that's our underlying concern. And to try to facilitate that as best that can be done, we believe that prior to engaging the survey and particularly the hydrology aspect of the project, the phase 2 aspect, we think that the engagement with the regulatory agencies would be helpful to the extent that at least the input parameters that they feel should be a part of the model are included. And the reason I suggest this is that if they come along later in the process and say, you didn't do this, and you didn't do this, we want you to do it, there's going to be more costs and more time delays involved should that occur. And we think that it's a good practice to not try to solicit from them the design, but to solicit from them the parameters by which they would feel a good design could be derived. And I believe that they have expressed that desire to provide that input to us. We should take advantage of it. I don't believe that it'll cost us that much in the way of time just to run that by them. And the effort here is just to try to do as much as we can with the money that's available and within the time that is allotted to us. We are concerned that we get a complete picture of the Kehoe watercourse from its upper reaches east of Highway 1, where 95% of the water that goes into the Kehoe watercourse comes from, all the way through to the Pacific Ocean. So that entire water flow needs to be addressed and evaluated. And if that's the plan, then we're good with that. And the last thing that I would like to say is that with respect to has to do with the benchmarking of the damage that's already been done in the Kehoe watercourse. Many of the property owners have lost property already as a result of years of neglect and drainage issues. And I think it's important that we get some kind of benchmark of that so that we know where we stand and we know how to test the model later as events come to bear, such as rain and flood. Should they actually finally arrive, we need to be able to evaluate the impact that those have on the Kehoe watercourse. Thank you.
Thank you. Paulette Eisen, followed by Jimmy Benjamin.
I'm very busy tonight. All right. First of all, I want to thank, I'm assuming, let's put it this way, I'm assuming that Mayor Fraser is in our corner here to get resolution, something done on the Kehoe watercourse. There are some of you on the council that I question your genuine interest in actually having anything, any solution happen here. But I think there's a majority, I hope, on the council that is serious about getting something really done for Kehoe. There are at least 7 people that wrote to me and said they really wanted to be here tonight, but given the short notice that this was even on the agenda, that they couldn't make it. So their voices are not being heard tonight. I'd like to know if there's some way that when there is an important issue like this on the agenda, obviously somehow Friends of the Library knew, and as I say, I got the email from Hope, I think it was a week ago, about attending this meeting because the library issue would be on the agenda. You all know how important this Kehoe thing is to all the neighbors of Kehoe. If you know you're going to have it on the agenda, is there some way to get some notice beyond just 2 days before the meeting? That's a question I have for you. I want to praise the city staff on getting it on the agenda at least, but on the other hand, it begs the question about notice. So I'm really happy that the hydrology study is moving forward, because of course we've been asking for this for at least 2 solid years. I just want to make sure that the money will be spent wisely. You know that's my benchmark. It's always about bang for the buck. And that the study is going to be comprehensive and help guide us towards a solution. And I agree, one of the issues that we've had in everything that the city, almost everything that the city has done, is that you don't consult with the regulatory agencies first. Get their input. I'm sorry there's nobody here from Schaff and Wheeler. I'm concerned about Schaff and Wheeler because I'd like to remind the council, if they're not aware, that Schaff and Wheeler was the company that was part of the Calendar and Associates team that came up with the 4 solutions that none of you thought were very good. And when I asked them questions at their outreach meetings, specifically the person from Schaff and Wheeler, I got nothing from this woman. She was young. I don't know what kind of experience level she had, but she was not forthcoming with anything like, for instance, why don't we do a hydrology study first, as that would be very important. So I'm just saying that if we're using Schaff and Wheeler, I understand that supposedly otherwise they're a good company. I would like us to make sure there's a senior person with experience that is involved in this project. Thanks.
And Jimmy Benjamin.
Thank you, council members. I thought council people would get a laugh given the council men thing earlier, so sorry if that fell flat. Jimmy Benjamin, and I apologize for offering you my letter this evening. It was because I didn't find out about this item on the agenda until the middle of the weekend, and I'm grateful for the insight. I understand and appreciate that this is part of a larger context of solving the issues around the Kehoe watercourse, and like my neighbors, I'm going to assume that we have at least a majority, if not a unanimous group that wants to see a real solution that addresses erosion and flooding and environmental constraints on this parcel permanently. It is not a problem that you created. It is a problem that you inherited. But it is nonetheless a problem that we need for you to solve. In my letter, I tried to raise just 6 questions or 6 points. I was concerned about the vagueness of the boundaries, and I hope that the council will clarify, as Walter asked, the full extent. We've had a situation where words like Caltrans mitigation wetland site meant different things to different people, and it's led to complications. And there's no reason for that to happen if we're all on the same page. We ought to say that in the contract. There was an explicit list of water sources that were going to be used to derive the analysis. It missed significant sources. I called them out in the second point of my letter. I won't reiterate the relevant jurisdictional regulatory agencies, except to say that they have insight that can help make the models produce some valuable information. If the hydraulic models assume a very smooth channel, for example, and then we bring that to the agency $50,000 later and they say it's a rough channel or it's not a habitat, we're going to be back at the table spending more money. That's the value of getting channel width, channel depth, floodplain width, roughness of the contour, and those kind of parameters up front before you pursue the study. That's how you avoid having money flow like water under a bridge. The question about the banks of the water line is really about understanding existing conditions. I'm not sure I understand and hope that you will clarify our planning director's position. It sounds like he doesn't object to knowing where the easements and property lines are relative to the banks. It's important because we can make good decisions or bad decisions based on the result of knowing that. And I think it's certainly in the community's interest to understand that. I want to be sure, earlier I distributed through Siobhan a copy of a letter that was sent to the staff concerning this. It came from the expert in the Regional Water Quality Control Board. I was a bit surprised that this wasn't in the public record, and I brought it here to be sure that it would be in the public record. It really lays out the case, and doing that will help us achieve great grant applications that could pay for a project that won't cost $10 million. She represents that the project would be at more like $2 million, less than we're spending on the architectural services for the library. Thank you.
Thank you, and that concludes public comment. Yeah, we need to do this hydraulic study. Needs to get done. As one of the speakers mentioned, yeah, I mean, I offered to put more money in the budget for this, so you know where I stand on this. I just want that cleared away. I have for years and years. So if this is one step to get it going, good. Let's just do it. Council members, any other comments on this?
I will comment that the letter that was handed to us by June from a very competent staff member does not represent the Regional Water Quality Control Board's position at this time.
Thank you for stating that on the record. Councilmember Webb.
Yeah, I think Mr. Benjamin's letter made some good points. I think if we're not looking at all the watershed inputs into the channel, we're missing some critical information. I see this study as providing baseline information that will help define whatever alternative we end up funding and undertaking. So maybe there's a way to work with the consultant to make sure that we get the baseline information we need. But I do think the watershed inputs are really important. As survey the Lanstra property or get those surveys. I don't know if somebody has surveys, or maybe we need to update it because of changes to the land. But let's just make sure, even if we have to, add a task or add some budget, that we get all the information we need rather than having to go back later, if that's possible. So.
All right, any more comments?
Are you suggesting an amendment or a change to the current agenda item, or are you suggesting future, just to be aware of this as we move forward? What's the direction?
Okay, well, I would definitely recommend amending the agreement to include, to make sure that we're looking at all, hydrologic inputs into the channel. So not just what's coming, from properties or the culvert or whatever it is, but actually look, where's the water coming from? I assumed when I first read it that because we're going to be looking at potential detention basins east of 1, that we were going to be looking at all the watershed inputs. Mr. Benjamin seems to think that the current scope of work doesn't seem to include that. So I think maybe that's a matter of clarification first, and then...
Just, if I could, for the record, we agree that the inputs, the various inputs inclusive, the consultant has emailed us back and said they are inclusive. So okay. Even the list there, but they've put on the record that the contract, their scope of work includes those. We can certainly modify the scope of work accordingly with your direction and based on their comments to clarify that. But they have agreed that it's all inputs.
Okay.
Okay, so then we just need a motion to include that piece where it would include all the inputs. Does that sound right? Someone want to make a motion on that?
Need a motion for the item plus the clarification.
I'm ready for a motion, anyone?
I would move per staff.
Per staff recommendation?
To award the contract for Kehoe ditch surveying and technical analyses to Schaff and Wheeler.
We have a motion. Can I have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstain? Motion passes completely. And we are done for the, no, 14, that was it. 15. And we have no cards on that.
Anybody want to make some comments?
Anyone wants to make some comments on 15? Yeah, just you. And I'll just say, while you're looking for your notes, the county and CCAG are very engaged in sea level rise, as with many conversations going on across the bay and the regional board. And originally they were just looking at the bay side, and now they are very aware of Half Moon Bay and Pacifica, as myself and others in Pacific are quite vocal about that. So that's a good thing, and you're ready.
So I think the response is probably sort of adequate, but there's a lot of cutting and pasting going on, and I know staff is busy with a lot of other things. So I think maybe if we could, where we're always saying, you know, we're not sure, we're not taking a position, we need more information, I think it would be helpful to specify kind of what information we need, or talk about something we're doing, because the missing cover letter to the sea level rise report asks for cities to basically respond individually to each recommendation, which we didn't do, really. We're supposed to say, is this something we're going to take on? If not, why not, et cetera. So I think we need to put it more in the format spelled out in the cover letter. Currently, it is not. We don't actually give them the information that they're requesting, it looks to me. But I also want to point out that the correct spelling of the person that we're sending our response to is incorrect. It's actually Etazadi and not Etzadi, so we might want to correct the spelling on that. And we might want to talk about the fact, we don't mention it at all, that we're actually creating a climate action plan. We don't mention actually some of the things that we're doing. And we're updating the general plan, and we have a grant from the Ocean Protection Council to look at sea level rise. I think that was mentioned briefly, but kind of in short shrift. So I would try to just make it look like we're actually responding and not just cutting and pasting, if we can do that. At least mention some of the things we're doing and put it in the format that seems to address the request for information. That's all.
The first. There's really, I mean, if I could, there's two options. One is you can give us the direction to do that. We're perfectly happy to do that. The other is that this isn't due till the 3rd. It could come back to the September 1st agenda with the formal letter clarified. If I could say this, the difficulty we were having with this, frankly, was that this report was very different than most grand jury reports. I remember reading the one that was on tasers that came out a few years ago. And basically, these questions, the 1 through 4 that they asked for, are you going to be implementing tasers? No, yes, maybe, we don't think so, we have a problem with it. This study was all about, do we support a super agency of some form in the county to deal with and look at programming out how we're going to deal with sea level rise? I think the big issue and the big question that your council has to look at is probably likely to happen and probably necessary to happen. The flip side of that is, how is the coast side going to compete for attention and dollars given the multi-billion-dollar industry that's over along the bay, where sea level rise is going to affect those. And I think that's where staff was really having a challenge with responding to the way, because this is a form letter. Every single Every single grand jury report comes with this same form letter. I apologize about the name spelling, it should never happen. But the bottom line is 4, and they don't fit this item. And so we were forced to sort of say, you know what, this is an odd grand jury report, and this council has not really taken a position on whether you support that larger super agency of some form overseeing this. I think it's inevitable, but, you know, frankly, and I think you probably see it the same way. But that was the challenge that we were having. We can come back to the first with more clarity and do.
Specific recommendations, we'd love to take them. Frankly, we're trying to protect the council and provide some, not put the council and the city in a box. The big issue is going to be the governance and the funding, and there's lots of struggles with that going on now. We've had several conversations at the city managers group. I know they've had conversations at CCAG, and there's lots and lots of opinions about how that should happen.
Well, I'll just make 3 recommendations then. I would correct the person's name, the spelling of their...
It basically was answered, you know, we want to be involved, and certainly CCAG wanted to have a voice, and county talked about funding some things. So I can share a copy of that and certainly give it to the city manager and see what that response is. But people, well, through
the general plan.
Through the general plan, I just wouldn't want to be real specific at this point, because we don't know exactly what we're doing.
I think you have to be careful with what we're given the grand jury. I think the grand jury is just trying to gather some information, and where they go with it, who knows? You well know that. I think, as Magda said, the city managers are all over it, CCAG's all over it. Every agency, BCDC in the Bay is all over this, and I think whatever we can share back with the grand jury report, the best we can do with the limited time and staff we have. So that's my opinion.
I mean, just to share, there's conversations going on with all the companies that are on the Bayside, and they want them to pay for it. There's been discussions with put it on the tax rolls to a different percentage. There's gonna be a whole lot more conversations on this. But do you want to take a look at it and bring it back to us next month? Is that?
I would just, at least, at the very least, correct the spelling of the name. And
well, you think certainly we will do that.
Of Judge Edizadi's name, yes. That would be good, because we might come before, and we want to make sure we spell her name right. Okay, if there's no more discussion, if we could have a motion.
Adopt a resolution approving the city's response to the June 4th, 2015 grand jury report, flooding ahead, planning for sea level rise, and authorizing the mayor to sign and submit a letter of response no later than September 3rd, 2015.
Is there a second?
Yes, I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Motion passes completely. Thank you. And it's 10:43. This is concluding City Council meeting of August 18th. It's back to school week. Thursday, Cunha in the high school start. What? And we have closed session. We're not done. Okay.
Is this for just keep?
Back to school. Thank you.
Let's talk about this. Like I said,